Curse of the Forest Witch offers an encounter setting for you to drop into your game of Dungeons & Dragons, or your choice of a fantasy setting or story. This example was made in the 3D world builder and virtual tabletop system of RPG stories. Web links are in the video description. I wanted to create a classic fantasy adventure involving a witch living in a magical and dangerous forest environment. The different zones of the forest become increasingly deadly with approaching toward the center where the witch now resides. While traversing through the forest zones, characters will learn more about this environment, face increasing levels of threats, and gain special knowledge or materials that will help toward a final confrontation with the forest witch. I started with a concept about someone who was connected with the primordial magic of a forest, and then somehow an evil force transformed her into the forest witch. Some time ago, a woman lived closely with the power of nature here. For whatever reasons, she moved to live deep inside the forest, away from everyone else. People grew fearful of the Lady of the Forest, and they condemned her as a witch, leading to her death. An ancient power within the forest reached out to bring the woman back to life, not as herself, but rather as the forest witch, as a manifestation of an evil force that had inhabited the forest long ago. The witch now tortures anyone who intrudes into the forest domain. People say that the forest is cursed and haunted by the forest witch. If you will wander too far into the forest, then you will become lost in a labyrinth of shifting trees, fog, and spider webs. Even for the people who cautiously stay at the outer edges of the forest, they suffer nightmares, become fearful and suspicious of each other, and sometimes disappear into the forest, never to be seen again. A river or a stream passes safely around the outer edge of the forest where people now live in a small hamlet. This hamlet is the only place along the river where anyone has been able to live and where anyone has been able to rest safely while using the river as a trade route connecting to the distant cities. Unfortunately, the place now is becoming too dangerous. Lately, people have been disappearing more and more frequently into the forest. As additional adventuring ideas, perhaps someone is searching for a special ingredient that can be found only in this forest. Perhaps someone wants to learn about the ancient primordial magic of the forest. Maybe someone is seeking to meet the forest witch or to communicate with the ancient power that channels through the witch. I depicted the overall environment with a simple two-dimensional sketch map that I imported into RPG stories. Next, I created a series of detailed three-dimensional environments of the specific encounter localities. For each encounter, I created a separate tab in the project. Depending on what the characters are doing and where they are situated, I can open whatever tab corresponds to their activities. Otherwise, too much detail in a single open tab can create problems in computer processing, especially when playing a game online. Just outside the forest, the small hamlet can serve as a starting point where the characters can learn about the forest and ease their way into the adventure. The main characters might be from this community, or they could be connected to this place or to the people in some way. I did not create the full details of the hamlet because I wanted to allow for developing according to whatever will work best for the characters and their stories. At the outer perimeter of the forest, the characters are exposed to some of the environment and the story elements, and then gradually they will learn more along their way toward the center of the forest. For general environmental effects, I found inspiration in the spell called Guards and Wards in the basic rules of Dungeons & Dragons. The core idea is to equip the forest environment with mysterious fog, sticky spider webs, and other magical effects that can misguide intruders and build more tension. The forest witch prepared guards and wards in multiple parts of the forest, and she cast the spell every day for 1 year in order to make it permanent. The entire forest is saturated with magic, growing stronger toward the center of the forest. I made a few adjustments to the spell Guards and Wards in order to apply it effectively in this setting. A few minutes after first entering each zone of the forest and then repeated after every 1 hour, I ask for a random dice roll to ascertain what particular effect will manifest in the surrounding area. The possible effects include sticky spiderwebs, as with the web spell, minor illusions that block passage, and mysterious fog that can obscure the area and cause people to become lost. Technically, inside a heavily obscured fog, the characters never would be able to see anything. In these situations, I like to allow for degrees of visibility in normal, lightly obscured, and heavily obscured conditions. Closer to the center of the forest, I ask for additional dice rolls to overlay special magical effects within constrained localities that replicate spells such as Suggestion, Stinking Cloud, Gust of Wind, Magic Mouth, and Dancing Lights. I like to make these spells deliver threatening messages in the voice of the Forest Witch, essentially telling the intruders to leave the forest and never come back, or else to suffer the curse of the Forest Witch. These communications can reveal little snippets of the backstory of the Forest Witch, such as how she was persecuted and hunted, how she suffered a torturous death, and how she came back to life with an ancient evil power now channeling through her. Whenever a character undergoes a short rest or a long rest in the forest, then nightmares intrude into the character's mind. The Forest Witch implants disturbing visions about how she was persecuted. After the first such nightmare occurrence, then every next instance will allow for the Forest Witch to read a character's surface thoughts during the nightmare and to taunt each character personally. The overall design involves a set of zones, represented as concentric rings. Characters can approach from any direction, but they always will proceed through these zones. After the characters enter a zone, I add a new dice roll about the Guards and Wards spell, plus I ask for another roll of the dice to ascertain where and when any special encounter will occur within this zone. The specific encounters are not fixed in their locations within the overall map. In this way, I can drop each specific encounter into whatever location will work best. For each zone, I prepared a few options and variations of the encounters that I could adjust according to the choices and actions of the characters. Potentially, the characters could avoid an encounter entirely, or they could do something that makes a situation better or worse. In the outermost zone, the encounters are unsettling but not deadly for the characters. Warning symbols are in the trees or on the ground, signaling that intruders should turn back now or else face serious danger deeper into the forest. I include effigy dolls that represent the tortured life of the witch. The effigy dolls and the surrounding trees can be marked by arcane runes and glyphs. The presence of the characters will attract nearby animals, such as crows, spiders, bats, or toads, that talk with the voice of the Forest Witch. Additionally, the characters meet their first encounter with the Guards and Wards spell. This outermost zone is not intended for combat, rather the intention is to provide warnings for the characters and previews of what they might expect if they will move farther into the forest. In the next zone, the characters have passed through the warning signs and now they will meet hostile resistance. In scattered locations, the characters can learn more about the local plants and animals, including some that are dangerous and others that are potentially beneficial. The dangerous possibilities include a swarm of spiders, a group of aggressive birds using the Bloodhawk statistics, or a patch of violet fungus. Most of these encounters should be easy through medium challenge for the characters. Additionally, throughout this zone, the characters will find the ruins of old houses and farms. The characters can explore and learn more about the environment and about the history of what happened here. Some of these places might include the plants and animals that were corrupted by the Forest Witch. A potentially deadly encounter in this zone involves one of the old ruined households. You can choose the one that will work best for you. The place was destroyed, and now some of the talking animals live here. In this case, the talking animals become angry, and their voices transform into the voice of the Forest Witch. The animals begin to convulse and coalesce into a swarm of beasts, a giant beast or multiple such entities, depending on whatever will substantiate a suitable challenge for the characters at this stage. I like to use giant toads or giant frogs, swarms of bats, and various snakes or giant snakes. While the creatures convulse and coalesce, the characters will notice just for a moment the grotesque shape of a twisted, corrupted, and vaguely humanoid face representing the Forest Witch. Whenever the transformed animal creatures make physical or magical contact with a character, then the Forest Witch can detect the surface thoughts of this character and use the animal creatures to deliver a personally threatening message. The old house ruins can be convenient for the characters to find healing potions, spell scrolls, or other items that will help them to survive during their next encounters. In the next zone, closer to the center of the forest, the special encounter here involves a plant creature under the control of the Forest Witch. This encounter should be combined with the effects of the Guards and Wards spell. Additionally, on initiative count 20 of each round of combat, a random spell effect will occur in a random location. At first, the characters notice the Guards and Wards spell, and they notice more of the violet fungus that they had encountered earlier. Additionally, though, another creature is here, sent by the Forest Witch to attack the characters. Possibilities could include a shambling mound, a corpse flower with zombies, or a tree blight. For a lower level of challenge, you might consider a group of twig blights or needle blights. These creatures could represent the transformed and corrupted plant versions of the people who previously had perished in the domain of the Forest Witch. The innermost zone is the home of the Forest Witch, where her powers are the most intense and dangerous. The effects of the Guards and Wards spell are persistent throughout this zone, and the extra random spell effects occur more often. Before reaching all the way to the house of the Forest Witch, the characters will come across an area marked by more of the warning signs and effigy dolls of the Forest Witch that the characters had seen earlier. Whenever someone enters into this area, then an effigy doll will animate and speak, warning that the characters have awakened the memories of how the witch was tormented during her former life. Now the characters will suffer in the same way. This encounter could progress through 2 or 3 parts, reflecting the kinds of suffering that the Forest Witch had endured. For instance, one part could reflect how people came after the witch with torches and pitchforks, perhaps using modified versions of zombies to represent the scene. Another part could reflect how people attempted to drown the Forest Witch, using corrupted versions of water weirds or water elementals, producing painful gurgling sounds. You can decide what will work best in your case while being respectful of safety tools and content warnings about how the witch had been treated. If the characters can survive this encounter, then an effigy doll will speak once more, recognizing that the characters have persevered. The Forest Witch knows that the characters have moved close to her house, and she dares them to approach. At this point, the characters should know that they are about to move into the final major encounter of this adventure. The house of the Forest Witch is situated on a small rocky outcrop surrounded by water. The characters could attempt to approach from any direction. If you will access this project through the Steam Workshop and open it within RPG Stories, then you can toggle the view of the multi-level construction. The roof of the witch's house was coded as a separate upper level. In this way, characters can move seamlessly through the environment, and you can decide whether or not to show the roof. In the world of Dungeons & Dragons, the game statistics for the Forest Witch probably are represented best by the classic monster known as a green hag in the basic rules. In the book Volo's Guide to Monsters, Chapter 1, you can find extra lore about hags, and you can find guidance about the design of a hag's lair, possible lair actions, and optional spellcasting features that can make an encounter uniquely challenging and memorable. I like for the Forest Witch to use a Lair action to open or close all of the doors and windows in her house, as well as to abjure them with an arcane lock. In my version of this scene, a bubbling cauldron acts as a magical focus. The Forest Witch can use her cauldron for Lair actions and for legendary resistance. The liquids, bubbles, and fumes burst out from the cauldron to create these effects. The characters should be able to target the cauldron and destroy it as a way to weaken the Forest Witch and overcome this formidable foe. The surroundings here include various terrain formations, watery or swampy parts, and the special effects of the Guards and Wards spell. In this place, the familiar effigy dolls of the Forest Witch will animate using the statistics of scarecrows. Additional minions or servants could include giant spiders in the trees, green guard drakes in the water, and scattered patches of violet fungus. You might consider to add flying creatures such as swarms of bats or a group of bloodhawks. If the characters can defeat the Forest Witch, then the forest will return back to its natural condition. The Guards and Wards spell will terminate. The plants and animals will become ordinary once again. The nightmares and other effects will come to an end. The characters should witness these conditions while they travel back out from the forest. Just when the characters are about to exit the forest, you might add a little bit of a teaser for a future adventure. The characters suddenly feel a chill in the air. A gust of wind makes the trees tremble. The animals fall silent and hide. A voice chuckles and cackles in the wind, telling the characters that this story is far from over. The ancient evil of this place lived through the form of the Forest Witch, and now it will seek another form. This design is open for you to develop. Within each zone, what clues will the characters learn about the environment or about the Forest Witch? With each encounter, what kinds of rewards or treasure might be suitable for the characters toward the character development and toward the goals of this adventure? What are your thoughts about the Curse of the Forest Witch? Please share your ideas and suggestions in the comment section.